Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. This is the Technology Unplugged event with Triumph Tech. So glad that you guys are all here. I'm Jennifer. I'm with Career Services. And then this is our panel here from Triumph Tech. I'm going to have each of them just introduce themselves, who they are in the company, and just like a brief little introduction of themselves. So we'll go ahead and start with John.
Sure. I'm John Edmiston. I'm a partner at Triumph Tech. Triumph Tech services churches. So we do a few things. One, we build an open source church management system. And if you're not familiar with the church management system, you might think, what does a church need with a church management system? And the answer is a lot. It's amazing how sophisticated and powerful those systems are. So we write that system, but then we also do consulting. We can build websites for them on top of our platform. We do custom development. We do mobile apps. We do Apple TV apps. So we do a lot of things in the service of the church. I've been doing that for about 7 years. Before that, I spent 13 years as a communication director and the director of IT at Christ Church of the Valley, which is one of the largest churches in America. And before that, I was actually at Honeywell. So I have a blend of secular experience, but also church experience.
I'm Trevor Godfrey. I graduated from GCU in 2020. I work for Triumph Tech. I was originally hired as an IT technician, but has since transferred over to mobile app and Apple TV development.
I'm Kyle Henning. I'm still a student here at GCU. I graduate this April. I just got hired at Triumph Tech last month in February. So I'm currently part-time with them, and then as I graduate, I'll come on full-time as a software developer there.
So we touched on this a little bit just with your brief intro there, but how did each of you get started in your field, and what positions led you to your current job?
So I came out of college in '95, and I went to NAU, and they trained me to be an excellent mainframe programmer at the time when mainframe programmers were like not needed. But I think that's a good thing because I would say I came out not as a mainframe programmer. I came out self-educated in a lot of things, including the internet, which was brand new back then. So I went to Honeywell, became a client-server programmer until I could teach them that the internet was kind of a cool thing. And then I got to ride that internet wave through the organization. And from there, God came into my life. I became a Christian at Honeywell. And Honeywell was about to get bought out by GE. And so they came to a lot of us in corporate and said, hey, you're not needed anymore. We're going to give you this package just to have you go find something else. And I had 15 months of salary just given to me. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. Ironically, that deal never went through, and it's still Honeywell and GE are still separate companies. But it gave me the opportunity to start volunteering within my church. And so I would just go in during the day and work. And one day they said, hey, do you know anybody who'd want to do this full time? And I'm like, well, I don't know, like maybe I would like to do that. And they said, oh, no, not you, because we don't really pay that well. And I'm like, well, how much does it pay? And they told me, I'm like, yeah, you don't pay well. But again, God had given me this gift of 15 months of salary. So, and I'd been paying off debt, and I would say that was like the hardest thing financially is to go to work for the church, but I was never more blessed in my life. Even financially, like God's accounting, trust me, it doesn't work. The Bible even says that, right? You know, trust your finances with Him and you'll be amazed, and it's true. And then from there, it's just been a wild ride. I thought I'd literally be at CCV for 15 months, maybe 6 months, and I'd get everything cleaned up, and then they wouldn't need me, and I wouldn't need them, and we'd go part our ways, but it was a wild ride. And I would just say, like, just, you know, follow God, and He's got a path that's, like, so huge you can't understand it. And if you just take micro steps, you'll be surprised where you end up.
So growing up, I had a love for technology. I would build my own computers and set up my own home networks. Background history with work is kind of interesting. I just worked at Sonic Drive-In for 5 years. And then after I graduated college, I worked for the PGA Tour for a little bit doing drug testing, and then got my foot in the door in the tech world with Triumph.
I first got introduced to tech and software development through my dad, who's actually a software developer. So that was back in high school. Then came out to GCU and kind of did their programs. Did a couple projects of my own, and then got an internship position at Little Bird, which some of you may have heard of that company. So I got some good software experience there, and then through the capstone process, I got connected with Triumph.
Awesome. Next question is, how does technology in your role impact people on a spiritual level?
That's a good one. I would say that what we work on, it's easy to see that. The websites, the mobile apps that we write, the technologies that we use, helps people every day, thousands and thousands and thousands every day. Prayer requests go through our system, and then the apps that like Trevor writes, the mobile apps, make it really easy to submit your prayer requests and pray through those prayer requests. I mean, millions of prayer requests go through our system every day. We also, our content personalization features get content to people who need it the most. I could tell you stories all day, but one maybe I'll just talk about is recently a church came to us and said, "Hey, you have to hear this story. You guys wrote a system that we can track all the volunteers within a church, and we can track like when people disengage from volunteering, when they stop showing up, and we can give reports so that we can go follow up with them. Because when people stop serving, there's usually a life change that it's a pastoral moment." And so they were using our software to do that, and they made the phone call and say, "Hey, I haven't noticed you haven't been coming and serving and recently. Is everything all right?" And the person said, literally started laughing and said, "This is amazing. Because I'm on a beach and I'm about to kill myself." And when you can put your life into something like that, it's amazing. And I would say everybody should find something that doesn't waste their life. There's a pastor at Elevation Church. He says, most Christians are not in danger of ruining their lives. They're in danger of wasting them. And you should really internalize that. Because when your software can save lives, it's pretty crazy.
Being a front-end developer with mobile apps and Apple TV, it's easier for me to see the impact it's going to have, but people on the back end doing the back-end coding, it's harder for them to realize the impact it's going to have. So John talks about it all the time in our meetings, that the work we do behind the scenes is just as impactful as work done in ministries.
And in my short time I've been at Triumph, I've already been able to see just opportunities that connection can really be expanded towards just regular churchgoers and church staff through the website platform. And that's.
So in your everyday life, what is your normal routine with work?
Mine's not a very healthy one. I love what I do, so I always tell people if I won the lottery, I would do the same thing. I'd just probably buy a nicer chair. So I love what I do, and I think when you can find something that you love, it's really not a job. You never work a day in your life. Now, there's a lot of things I have to do that I don't really enjoy, because that's just a part of any kind of career. But I work a lot of hours. I'm also just fascinated by technology, so I'm always doing research. I tend to have to do that on my own time, because during the day I'm leading the organization. I'm writing software a little bit myself. I'm designing systems and helping coach and start up new areas of our business. So it's a really wide blend. I'd say I'm probably one of the more technical people on the team, but at the same time I love design and I love business. So I would just say don't get pigeonholed. Find what you love and just be passionate about it. And I would probably say our culture says it's not okay to work hard, and I would say that's not true. Like, God calls us to work hard, and you shouldn't be afraid of working hard. And you got to figure out what your motivations are. And if you're working hard to please your boss, okay, that's probably not a good thing. But if you're working hard to please your boss, who happens to be God, then that's a great thing. But don't listen to culture that just says, "Hey, don't serve the man." No, this is your career. Like, this is something we were born and put into this world to create and to help others, and we should just pour ourselves into that. So my daily is a little crazy, but I love it.
My daily is definitely not as crazy. I don't have to do any of the coaching or anything like that. But it is definitely fun working with everybody and communicating internally with everybody at Triumph. Um, Being the IT technician and a mobile app developer, I do a little bit of both throughout the day. Whenever somebody needs something internally, I try and help out as much as I can. Um, Obviously, I have projects for clients that I have to get done. But yeah, just building mobile apps and Apple TV apps.
And I would say for Trevor, I mean, I'll brag on him a little bit more because he won't do it for himself. I mean, he's really good at communicating. So there's a lot of communication within the organization, but he actually does a lot of communication outside the organization. So he's responding to those, clients, and people don't come to us for easy stuff. And that's what I always remind the team. Like if they're going to pay for something, they're going to pay for the hard stuff. They're going to do the easy stuff themselves. And so we're constantly, trying to figure out their complex problems. Like recently, we had some, issues with our CDN service. We're moving the CDN over. And it's really technical about what those problems are and be able to figure that out because there's also no like manual for Trevor's job. He has to figure it all out, and he can come ask some of us, but for the most part, he really does a lot of work trying to research it. And then he has to be a really good communicator because we have to deal with a lot of different parties externally. So I'd say communication is so key in technical roles, and I think sometimes I know when I was in college, we didn't get taught that much. We had one business communication class, and I wish I had more.
And then my daily work life is a bit unique right now, considering I'm still a GCU student. So it's kind of split halfway between going to work and then also going to class. And then usually when I'm off both work and class, I'm pouring in a lot of hours to my capstone project still, which has just been kind of a great opportunity to push my skills, learn new things. Yeah.
So, John, you touched a little bit on communication collaboration. So, what is your favorite type of customer to work with? Is there a collaborative effort with your customers, or is it just like an overarching structure in how you work with them?
Yeah, we work with a lot of different churches, and so we have a lot of different types of churches. I think some of my favorite churches are the ones who have maybe some technical abilities themselves, and we can collaborate deeply with them. And they come to us with a challenging problem and some capabilities on their own, and we can work together to do that. So I'm thinking of specifically, there's a church in California called One and All, and they do a lot of really cool personalization in their communications with their congregation. And so we're building a lot of AI-driven tools to help create, diversify maybe the messaging a little bit, make it even more targeted. And also working on some new communication tools around email that are really easy to create highly rich personalized emails. So I think they challenge us, and they have a lot of good ideas, and we have a lot of good ideas, and we can collaborate together. I think those are at least my favorite. And they also, sometimes it's nice to have a church that has a little bit of a budget, because some of the stuff we do, I mean, it costs money. So there's a couple churches who have a lot of ideas and no budget, and we can put that on our back list. So some of these big churches, and what I love is they bring us the budget, and they're like, hey, here's what we need, but if you need a little bit more that can help the whole church, go ahead, like just put it in our budget. We work in a very non-competitive environment where every one of our customers wants to help every one of our other customers. There's not a lot of industries like that. Most industries would be like, hey, this is a trade secret, don't share it with anybody. It's quite the opposite in working with churches.
Next question. What is the coolest thing each of you has done so far in your career?
Well, mine is obviously starting and working with Rock. It's a great technology platform, but more than that, it's a great community. We spend half our time building community. I mean, that's why you have the Chip stickers. Chip is our mascot. He's incredibly well loved by the community, almost like oddly so. So they're always asking us for new stickers. We have a 4-foot, 3-dimensional model of him that we carry around to our conferences. I just love building that community and watching people grow. Probably my favorite thing is building a technology that then you can do training around, that then you can see someone change their whole career over. We have lots of people, hundreds of people in our community have used our product, and they've become superheroes. Before they might have been like just a church administrator, and they just thought, well, this is what I do, I administrate, help pastors. But now we've given them a tool that makes them the superhero of their whole staff, and now they're just like rock stars, which is what we call them. for their church. And I just love to see people grow like that and to find out that they were made for something more than what they thought.
Being super passionate about what I do, it's kind of hard to pick a specific project, mainly because I get to always see each church have the app that we build for them have a different impact. Sometimes we'll build staff applications for administration purposes, and then other times we'll build apps strictly for content, and each have their own purpose, so it's kind of difficult to choose one specific project.
Considering that my full-time career has yet to begin, I'm probably going to pull from my student career. So you've heard me talk about the capstone project before, but that's an area where you really get to show your skills off. I'm sure you've heard your professors talk about that before, but I would suggest going over and above on that capstone project. It can be easy to meet the bare minimum requirements, but that's really where your future employers can notice you on. You get to present it in front of many different future employers, so go above and beyond on that.
Okay, since you mentioned that, Kyle, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. Can you elaborate with that? And the question I have for you is, what areas would you suggest they concentrate on before they prepare for their future careers? And then each of you can answer as well.
I would say, first off, make sure that what you're doing is something that you truly love doing. If you're going to be watching the clock when you're doing that, then maybe start looking for a plan B option there. Secondly, I would say, especially when you're beginning your career journey, pour those extra hours when you could just be watching TV, playing video games, etc. Take the time in your free time to invest in your own skills, because that'll really pay off down the road.
One thing that I wish I did as a student was seek more internship opportunities. Coming out of college, I actually didn't have an internship, and so I really struggled to find a job in the tech space because they always ask for experience, and all I had was growing up building computers and setting up networks. So I would make sure that you guys focus on finding internships, but then also building a strong network with those good relationships. Although knowledge that you gain in classes are important, there is a phrase, it's not what you know, it's who you know. This is a very popular phrase, and it kind of holds true in any industry.
I love what Kyle just said. Like, go above and beyond, not only for the employer but for yourself. You are your own best investment. You know, I know a lot of people are get into stocks and trade stocks, and that's great. Do that. Like, be careful. Have care for your future finances, but you are the best investment. And go above and beyond, and just take the pride in that. The one thing I would say that you can do right now, especially as students, and this is key to life, be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like, we go through our lives, there's a whole book I'm reading right now, it's like this comfort phenomenon that we have, that we just go through life trying to be as comfortable as possible. Do you realize, like, we will never, or rarely do we leave 72 degrees temperature in a room. We go outside for a minute and then we're back into our cars and we're back inside. Our culture is so comfortable, and it's causing a lot of mental disorders, because when we get uncomfortable for any little reason, we can't handle it anymore. In previous generations, we lived with uncomfortableness everywhere. We didn't have beds, or the beds we had were just ropes. So I would say for you guys, that means get out and do something that you just would never do. Like, maybe it's public speaking, maybe it's becoming a leader in something. I know when I was sitting in your seat right now, I decided I better do something, because I needed to get some public speaking and I needed to get some leadership, and that didn't come natural to me. So I decided to join a club. It was called the Data Processing Management Association. Could you think of a worse named club? And they've since renamed it, I think. And so one day they decided, it's coming in my senior year, and they said, well, we need a new president. Who wants to be the president? Put your hand up if you want to be, put into the election for president. And I literally had to use both hands to put my one hand up, because I was so not wanting to do that. Ironically, I did get to be president, and my dorm called me king of the nerds for a whole year. And I I stunk at it, but I needed to do that because I was so uncomfortable. Like my first meeting, I was like so poorly prepared. And I would say just now, just even today, try to find something that's uncomfortable and then keep doing it. And if you join our team, like we talk about that all the time. Craig Rochelle, he's a famous pastor at a church in the country. He says, growth and comfort can't coexist. So if you want to grow, you're going to have to be uncomfortable. You can prove that because you can go to the gym, and if you come out comfortable, like your muscles don't hurt, you're probably not going to grow any muscle, right? At least that's what I'm told. I haven't really experienced that myself. But I've become mentally uncomfortable almost my whole career. And I think if you want to succeed in life, you have to be uncomfortable. So find something today, like literally today, that you can go do that's uncomfortable, and then find something to do before you graduate that's going to make you super uncomfortable. Would be the best advice I could give you.
And John does a great job of that in our work environment. Kyle, you'll learn this. But he'll kind of just throw you into the fire pit, and you got to find your way out of it.
That sounds fun. Next question. What potential challenges do you foresee in the intersection of technology and ministry?
I would say two things. We need more technology in ministry, but we need the right technology in ministry. I think another thing, it kind of touches on maybe another question coming up, is about AI. I think AI is an amazing thing. We should all be like getting really deep in understanding that and its application. But I think we have to be careful in ministry how we use it. It can never become a replacement for pastoral care. It can never become the answers to theological questions. But more importantly, your generation is going to have to help us deal with some really interesting questions about what is life. If you should start reading about that. There's a book called Life 3.0. It's written by someone who's definitely not a Christian, does not have a Christian worldview. And if you read it as a Christian, you'll probably kind of chuckle because what they are trying to define life on is scary. And so pastors have no idea like how to deal with this. If I look at when I was a kid to now, some of the questions that we're wrestling with today in this culture would seem so foreign and so crazy to me. And yet we're just getting started. When we start having questions that is AI really life, and you might think that's crazy, but there's a ton of people who are actually pushing for that right now. And what is life? I think it's interesting because if you study history, you'll see the devil only has a few tricks up his sleeve, but he keeps using them brilliantly. And this whole thing about creation and corrupting creation and how AI is becoming that same thing. We're having like a Tower of Babel moment again. And we need people who understand not only the technology, but also have a Christian worldview to help influence our culture, because the rest of the culture is ill-prepared, especially pastors. They have no idea what's coming. And they're dealing with some pretty big things right now, but they have no idea the wave behind those things. So I would say, your generation is going to be able to help with that, but you first have to understand it. And I think you have to be a good student of history. You have to be a good student of the current technology state, and then also make sure you have a good worldview, that you have a biblical view of life.
Yeah, as ministries utilize technology more and more, I think one key factor of ministry is the face-to-face communication. And as technology is used more readily throughout churches, that face-to-face communication might start to diminish. And that's something I think is important that we should keep as best as we can.
Yeah, going off what Trevor said, I feel like the technology in the church space should be used as a tool to help encourage those face-to-face communications, because that's really what it's about. It shouldn't be used as a substitute to those face-to-face communications.
So, John, since you brought it up, we're going to go to AI. How do you envision the advancements of artificial intelligence shaping our industry in the coming years?
Well, I think it's definitely going to change everything, and mostly in ways that we can't even imagine right now. I mean, there's some ways we can imagine, right? We can kind of see a little bit into the future, and so those are obvious. But I think if we're really honest, if we could jump in a time machine, we would have no idea that was even possible, even have thought that idea. I mean, even if you look back at the internet, having grown up without the internet and had my career through the creation of the internet, there's so many things we couldn't even have thought of. Like we knew as soon as I saw the internet, I'm like, the web didn't even have images when I was on it. I knew it was going to be big, but I had no idea we would be doing the stuff we are now. And I think we have to use that same lens with AI. There's a lot of things that we can imagine right now, and you guys are doing some pretty cool projects. I was watching a video of some of your projects being talked about. It's like amazing what you're working on, but just realize that is like, that's going to be seen as like trivial, like what is coming. So I'd make sure that you're reading a lot about AI. You're watching, the news. You got to follow also the personalities of AI. So if you don't know what Sam Altman's doing this week, you should. He's been talking about ChatGPT 5 and what's coming, and you have to look at their worldview. Like, how do they see the world? Because that's what they're going to project the technology to do. You can't just look at it from a technology perspective. You have to look at it from a biblical worldview. You have to look at it from who are the players and how do they think, how do they see the world, because that's the way it's going to get shifted. So I think it's easy to say, like in the next year, learn ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you think. But I think it's better to look further out and look at the more cultural ramifications of AI. But definitely in ministry, we have to be careful because we don't want it to replace, kind of like what Trevor was saying, we don't want it to replace pastoral care. But also go a little bit deeper into the spiritual warfare behind AI. The Bible says that if we could pull back the curtain, even in this room, there's a spiritual war going on in this room that we can't even see. And if you don't think AI is going to be a part of that, like you're probably kidding yourself. It definitely is part of that. And we don't want to over-spiritualize things, but we certainly in America are probably guilty of doing the opposite of under-spiritualizing things. And I think in the Western world, we under-spiritualize things, and in some areas outside the Western world, they over-spiritualize things. And I think the truth is somewhat in the middle.
I don't know that I can really add to that. John kind of covered everything.
Okay. What does a typical project timeline look like for your company?
Not enough time. I mean, constantly. Now, we have a weird model because our product I said half of what we do is the product. We actually give it away for free. It's open source. You can go on to GitHub. You can see every check-in from every commit from every developer every day. So you could use our product for free. Now we don't. We try to highly recommend that they donate, but that's a hard model because it's not forced, right? So I would say we're underfunded in some aspects, and so we have to do a lot more with less. Also, because we work with churches, our billable rates have to be less than secular space. Yet at the same time, we want to pay secular salaries. So that means we have to be highly productive and highly efficient with what we do. We don't get to make a lot of mistakes and still keep the doors open. We're very conservatively run, so we keep a good pulse on our financials. But so we have to move faster than most places. And so I think for people who like that environment, they love our space, and for those who don't, that's probably not the right place. We like to tell people when we interview them, we're climbing Everest. We're about 25% of the way up. If you love to climb mountains, we're a great place. If you like to day hike, nothing wrong with that, but you won't like it at our place. Like, in fact, we can't carry your weight, and so we keep going on with the analogy. We'll find the next friendly village, and we'll get you situated there, and we'll move on because we're passionate about what we do. We feel like we're called by God to give churches the best technology on the planet, and we're underserving them right now. That said, we're serving them better than anybody else, but that's not where our goal is. Our goal is to give them the best technology to change the world. So our pace is just really, really, really fast, and therefore, we have to respond to things. Like we have stuff coming in right now for Easter. Ironically, we work exclusively with churches, but churches seem to forget when Easter and Christmas are every year. I don't know why that is, especially Christmas, because it's on the same day. So we're constantly responding to things at the last minute, and a lot of times we don't have the ability to say no. It's just like, okay, we got it, we're on it. So it's very fast-paced.
Yeah, to add to that, it's difficult to give any timeline for projects because client requirements are always going to be different. But as we've said many times, communication is key. We'll have clients who we have a difficult time communicating with, and so those project timelines get extended. And then we have clients who love to communicate, and we email every single day, and we can whip out those projects relatively quickly.
I'd say, with my experience, I've kind of learned in contrast to my previous job that at Triumph, every second counts pretty much. And while you're there, you should be focusing on how you're spending your time. When you leave the office, you should really be able to say to yourself that you spent every bit of time that you spent working well. So that's really been like a healthy lesson, I guess, for me as I've been joining Triumph. But yeah.
And I'd say too, like you're going to come out like knowing a lot of technology. Hopefully, you come out with a lot of communication. Hopefully, you come out with a little psychology too. Because I mean, what we do, you have to always be thinking about the psychology of how do you get the client to give you what you want when you want it. And I think the biggest characteristic you can think about is empathy. So, for example, how much time have you spent thinking about your professors and having empathy for them and the situations that they're in? How many times have you done something that maybe impacted them in a way that caused them to have to do more work or have to be more challenged by something? If you're highly empathetic, which you need to be when you get into your job, if you want to be successful, you should be thinking about like, what is this? How can I help my professor be a little bit easier on their schedule or what they need from me? We typically don't do that. I mean, as humans, we think about one person. It's usually ourselves, and we need to start thinking about, other people, especially like for us. Like we need to think about our clients. How do I make them happy? How do I get? I know I need this from them, but they're the ones paying. But how do I get what I need out of them on time? And a lot of times this is pre-planning. We can't wait till we need content for the mobile apps. We have to ask ahead of time. We also need to know psychology of like, maybe creating a false urgency for some content and say, well, if I need it by Wednesday, I'm not going to ask for it by Wednesday. I'm going to ask for it by Monday. And as long as I give them a fair amount of time, that's okay. But most of us don't think that way. They go, oh, well, I need it Wednesday, so I'll ask for it by Wednesday, and you're not going to get it. If you ask for it by Monday, you have 2 more days to say, well, the due date was Monday. Can I have it by Tuesday? And now you still have 1 more day. So a lot of like technology is just understanding communication and psychology, but I would say too, focus on empathy.
Stepping into what factors into projects and timelines, how does IP, legal, or other entities factor into your decision making or your project building?
Okay, so intellectual property is fun for us because we're open source, so we tend to just give it away. We also work with churches, so we tend to give them as much as we can. There's certain IP that we don't give away that maybe only we have a couple other partners who work with Rock. I mean, we write it, but they help other churches with it, so they consult with it. If it's not something that would help a church, then we kind of keep it close to the vest, at least for a little while. But we tend to give everything away, more than anybody else. All the other partners in our space, if you go to their website, they have very few articles, they have very few free tools, they have very few anything. Like you come to our site, we're constantly making new tools, we're constantly giving stuff away. Another lesson in life, you can't outgive God. So the more you're generous, the more you will receive. When it comes to legal, we have to be careful, especially we don't deal with a lot of churches in the EU, but man, if you have any kind of business in the EU, it just gets worse and worse. I think that the spirit behind what they're doing is good, but if you give it to the government, they will screw it up. And so there's even new rules that are coming out this week with the apps about some, are you a trader or not a trader? And it's that part of my job I hate because it just feels like such a waste of time. But we don't have a ton on that. We have a good lawyer, but we rarely have to talk to him, which is good. But we're a little bit different because we're open source, and our mindset is more generosity. We'd rather be taken advantage of by a church than us take advantage of a church. That would be the worst thing. And even the way we deal with our statements of work and our contracts, it's always in the best interest of the church. If we're going to hurt someone, we'd rather hurt ourselves than hurt the church. And I think even if you don't work with churches, that's still a good mindset. If you have good clients, good happy clients, your business is going to be much better than if you're always having to find new clients because you're burning the old clients.
And to add on to the intellectual property portion of that question, we have great designers at Triumph, and so every website and mobile app and Apple TV app, they're all unique. And so it's always fun getting to see the designs. I don't really have much say in the designs. It's mainly John and our designers. So getting to see them and then build it is awesome and very unique for each and every one.
I don't have anything left to add.
All your stuff is free on the internet. You check your code in every day, so
In the design aspect, we find that individuals who excel in the technology fields often consider themselves to be artistic or creative individuals. So do you feel like you fall into the category of being artistic?
yes. I love there's one designer out there, Chris Doe. He wears a hat that all the time that says, God is a designer. And since, we were made in his image, we are all designers. And anybody who says they're not, is like putting a limit on themselves, has a fixed mindset and not a growth mindset. I would say every person coming out of college, I don't care if you're technology or any career, should know the basics of design. Having something, being able to present your ideas in a way that's graphically pleasing is so amazing. When I had a little bit of that when I was at Honeywell, I just was interested in design, so my PowerPoint presentations tended to be a lot better than the next person because the next person did nothing. And so people actually would say, "Hey, John, you need to do that presentation." And here's a tip: like your presentation content can actually not be that great, but if it looks good, they want you still to present. I would suggest you have both, good content and good design. But good design sometimes can really help level up. And I think the cool thing is you might think, well, I'm not an artist. I would say 90% of design is following a couple basic rules. And if you watch those rules, go to YouTube, basic design rules. If you follow those design rules, your stuff will actually look really good, which will level up people's interest in what you have to say and your ideas. And that last 10%, okay, well, maybe that's a gift because I know some really great artists that I'll never probably be, but I can get reasonably close by just following the rules. So yeah, I think design is an amazing skill to have. If you have the ability to take a design class before you leave, your time here, I would definitely recommend it. Otherwise, YouTube has some amazing content on design.
When I started working for Triumph, I was graphically challenged UI-wise, and John has kind of taught me some of those key points that he just mentioned. And now I've gotten to this point where I'll see our Figma designs and I'll go to our designer and I'll say like, hey, why did you choose to do this? Or there's some minute differences between certain pages. And I can kind of see those as where at the start of my career I couldn't.
Yeah, on that design topic, with my elective opportunities at GCU, I was actually able to take 2 different design classes, and that got me introduced to a lot of different design software used for making like wireframes and UI diagrams, etc. Most recently, that's been in the form of learning Figma, which came into great use when it came to my senior capstone, and that's also everything design-wise that Triumph does is using Figma. So that's been huge.
You should even design your emails. I mean, you might think, well, how do you design an email? But if your email, if it's has any level of substance, sometimes I'll get some emails come through that the team is about to send. I'm like, hey, break that up. And so put some white space in between the paragraphs. Make the paragraphs really short. It's more approachable. Lowers the cognitive load that someone's going to do when they get this. Put hierarchy. Give it titles and make the hierarchy stand out so it's glanceable. It's still the same content, but if you put a little bit of a design in, even to your email, it's more likely to be read. And I keep reminding people, like, most people aren't going to read this email because it's like, I wouldn't read this email. It kind of hurts my head even to think about it. I put myself, through empathy into them. Like, I would probably say, I don't have time to read this right now. I'll get back to it, and I'll never get back to it. But if you make it a little bit more pleasing to the eye with good hierarchy and good white space, someone might say, oh, this will only take a second. Let me just scan this real quick. So design in everything is super important.
So another 2-parter, and then this will be the last question, and we'll open it up to the floor. What do you wish you would have done in college, and what additional advice do you have to the current students now?
I think I I think my college experience was probably the highlight of my life. I hated high school, but college was good. And I remember a situation. I have dyslexia, which I think is an amazing gift. It's not a challenge. Anybody who thinks it's a challenge, I mean, God gave me a gift. But I didn't realize I had dyslexia until I was in high school, and so I had this moment where I go, "Oh, okay, I have a handicap. That's cool. I can now like have an excuse for why I don't read very fast and why I don't understand certain concepts." But I remember literally my freshman year at NAU, for some reason I always took morning classes, and I got to class a little early, and the door wasn't open, but there was a trophy case right there. And I remember going, wow, they give an award every year for the top major in every discipline in the College of Business. I go, now my parents, they were afraid I was never going to get through college because I just didn't have high effort. And I remember looking at that, and I said, I'm going to get that award. I'm going to try at least. And I just put myself to it. And I changed everything. Like I just worked hard. I planned out my course catalog for the next 4 years because courses are that not every semester. And I just changed who I was, and I became a totally different person. And my parents didn't really realize who I was. They didn't understand what changed. And I would say that's inside of all of you. Like you are capable of being amazing, life culture changers if you want to. We always think that, Einstein had so much more ahead of us. Yeah, he had some gifts, but we're not that far off. We have the same amount of time he did. And I think we just count ourselves. Our culture discounts each of us. And, through your life, you've probably been told some things that aren't true. And you've probably told yourself a lot of things that aren't true. And so I would say, hey, this is a great moment. Even if you're only halfway through your college career, it's not too late. You can pivot. And do so not for anybody else. Do it for yourself, but also do it for the glory of God. Like, the Bible says that we should put all of our efforts in working for Him. And when you work for Him, the whole world changes. And so to use this time in your college career to figure out who you are and what is going to drive the decisions you make in the rest of your life. So for instance, if you say, hey, I want to make sure that God's driving my life and that what I do, the work I do is for Him, then how's that change when you get out and you have maybe two offers and they're different salary levels? Salary probably shouldn't matter, right? You should already have your lens of like which of these is going to push forward how I can help God achieve His mission here in His kingdom here on earth. Of course we all need to get food, but almost every career you get out of college you'll have enough to eat. And I think if you wait till you have those offers, you won't be able to make the decision because by then all your cultural norms will be telling you to use the salary. We just recently hired someone. They start Monday. He said in the interview, hey, I want to be here because I'm so enamored by your mission. I want to do things for God, and if I can do that through technology, even the better. Well, come later, we offered them a position. He's like, oh, I have this other offer, and it's for quite a bit more money. And we, kind of stuck to our guns because like we try to have parity and everything with college hires, and we don't know like who they are. So we put the challenge back, and he chose us. So in my mind, he was telling the truth. But in my experience, that's rarely the case. I can't tell you how many times I was hiring people at the church, and they wouldn't take the job if it made 10 cents less than what they made at the last job. And it made me sad because it's like, God has a plan for you, and you're going to make it over a few $1,000s. And trust me, God makes it up. Like His economy is amazing. So I'd say learn who you are, figure out what your lens in life, how you're going to make your decisions. And also don't listen to the lies that perhaps you've been told that you're not capable of what you are capable of. And I'd say whatever you think you're capable of, times it by 10, and that's probably the level that you are capable of.
So I'm a very introverted person. Triumph has kind of made me a little bit more extroverted. But when I was here at GCU, I would just go to class, do my homework, and go home. So I think it's important to kind of get out of the comfort zone, try and join a club or two, communicate with your classmates a little bit more, go to some sporting events, kind of build that community up.
I think I'd say, given your specific college major, a lot of them at GCU give the room for several elective credits. I know specifically the software development one that I'm in has an opportunity for a lot of elective credits, and I'd say take a good look at the specific classes that are in your lineup for that major, and then find some areas that you could maybe go get a little extra in. So for me, that would be like design or get some more experience with databases, and really maybe consider like a minor in any of those too, because you have the opportunity to choose what you want to do, push your comfort zone out, and invest in yourself with even the classes you take here. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Any questions out there?
So I was going to ask you, what kind of precedent do you think Elon Musk Neuralink chip presents from a Christian worldview perspective?
That's a great one. Transhumanism is a huge topic right now. And my grandfather always used to tell me, I used to work with him every day, I don't know the answers, let alone the questions. And I think that's, as we deal with some of these topics, I think that's true. I think in some cases, it's amazing that we can see these people who have disadvantages be able to restore some of that. But, and I'm not saying this is Elon's intent, but there are a lot of people whose intent is, we're going to put those into all of us, and we're going to increase our capabilities, and that's a great thing. We're going to be more productive, and that, I think, is definitely huge challenges. And I think if you love the Bible, you can start to see it come to pass. Like, I mean, it's hard not to see some of the stuff that's being done. It's like, that's totally the mark of the beast. Like, and I mean, it's not being forced on us yet, so it's not the mark of the beast. But, dude, it's like they're putting stuff on your wrists and your forehead. Like, that's amazing. And honestly, it's the best place for it because it's very portable to do stuff with your wrist, and your forehead is usually uncovered and right there. It's like, well, the Bible kind of said that, didn't they? So I think we have to be very careful. At the same time, as Christians, we shouldn't be like, no, don't tamper with anything. Like, there might be actually helping those people. Like the person who just got the first chip this week. You watch the video of his life change, and you're like, this is amazing. This person now has so much more things that he can do. So we don't want to throw it all out. But trust me, that line's going to get blurred so fast. I think the next one is like, so the blind can see. I think that's the next thing they've announced. And so how could that be bad? But I guess, too, not to over-spiritualize, but the devil always creeps in like, oh, these things aren't too bad. Next thing you know, like, how did we get here? So I'm not sure if that answers the question or just causes more questions.
It was a good answer. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, we have one over here.
Okay, so for us, our stack is typically Microsoft, so we use C#. We're currently in web forms, which is the older version of ASP.NET, but we're in the middle of transitioning all of our code to a C# backend with a Vue.js front end. All of the mobile apps use Microsoft's new MAUI cross-platform, which is a really great thing. It's kind of like React Native, but for Microsoft. We use SQL Server for our database. That said, we're not like, just because it says Microsoft doesn't mean it's the answer. It just happens to be that once you get into that stack, you keep using the stack. But we use OpenAI for our AI needs, although it's a plug-in architecture, so we could technically plug in anything. We're about to put a plug-in for Claude because it does some things differently. So basically Microsoft, but we use Figma a lot. I think Kyle mentioned Figma. Definitely learn Figma. That is such a great tool. And it's such a deep tool too. On surface, it's pretty easy, but if you get down to auto layouts and stuff, it can get a little tricky.
Oh, we have another one. He's coming with the mic.
I remember that you went over like a little bit of AIs and the ChatGPT like that is coming out, the new versions of it. I just want to ask, like, since we're technology field workers and like all related those, do you think the AIs can completely substitute the people in these areas? Like they can work for it, like the whole field? Well, like for example, the other fields are getting threatened by the AI uses in the future for their jobs. And I think one of the mostly endangered field is like the software development and some kind of cybersecurity field. And how do you think about that?
Yeah, I'll be honest with saying I don't know. I will say, though, that the best place you can be is at the top of your field. So, and that doesn't mean you have to be the top of your field coming out of college, but you better be the top of your field of college students coming out of college. Because AI will first replace, the bottom 90%, and the top 10% will still be needed to do prompt engineering and figuring out how to use it. I will say, though, in the area of software development, what I find in my experience in working with churches and even in the corporate space, the challenge for AI is going to be that people don't know what their problem is. So whenever someone like a business user or a ministry user comes and describes their problem of what they want me to solve, what they're describing is usually not the correct problem. It's like a symptom. And so usually I listen and sometimes their solution is the best form of requirements gathering, but it's usually not the right solution. So I listen, I ask a whole bunch of questions, and then near the end I'll say, okay, so it sounds like what you really want is this, and this. And they'll be like, yeah, that's actually what I want. And it's usually very different from what they said. In fact, I had one person I used to work with, they would say, I always love coming to your office because I come in with my problem and I leave with a different solution, but it's exactly what I wanted. And I think that's going to be the challenge for AI, because as the business users are giving it the prompts or describing what they want, they're actually not describing what they really want because they don't know how to ask. They don't know. And I think having AI try to solve that is going to be a little confusing. Now, eventually, like flash forward 20 years, maybe the AI is just like, dude, I know you're dumb, and I know what you really want, but at least initially, we're gonna get a lot of stuff that we don't really want. I think that same thing with like Midjourney. Like, it's amazing what it can do. It's like incredible. Like, I mean, I get into that a lot, but you still have to know what to ask, and I think that's where the creativity of, like, if you look at a movie producer, it's generating like these pretty cool movies, but it's like, well, how did you know that that's what was in your mind to say? I think the people who are making these incredible contents are because they're incredible artists, incredible creatives. But sometimes if I give it to a nephew, it doesn't come out the same, right? He doesn't have the same idea to put into it.
So, sorry, continuing. So, do you think there's like a specific skills or like any learnings to develop for us to be unique and not be substituted by the AI developed?
Yeah, well, definitely prompt engineering and understanding the pros and cons of every platform. For instance, like just one trivial example is that why is Claude better than OpenAI? Well, it can take a much larger data set and process through it. So my son, he's doing his capstone right now at ASU. He's working with Sandia Labs, and they're wanting to shove in all this regulation into these AIs and have the AI summarize what's changing in these regulations. Well, he needs to know, OpenAI is probably not the best platform from that. It's the best well-known one, but Claude might be better because it has a much larger capability of ingesting a document size that's way bigger. I think having that knowledge immediately is really important. But here's the other thing, and it's probably not as specific, but more powerful, is you guys have to leave this space being critical thinkers. Because our culture doesn't teach us to be critical thinkers. It used to. The Socratic method used to be the way the Greeks came up with that, and in most of Western cultures about Socratic method. Now, especially in America, it's like, here are the facts. Columbus discovered America in what year? We learn all these facts, but we're not learning critical thinking. There's a whole classical movement in some of the school system right now that we're teaching you the Socratic method and teaching you how to think, why to think. My kids had the opportunity to go through that, and so I went to the parent night, and in the biology class, he's like, okay, we're not going to talk about biology, we're going to talk about this rock. And he's like, why is this rock not a living being? And we spent 20 minutes talking about why a rock was not a living being. But it made us think through, not being told the four characteristics of a life form, but having to come up with it ourselves. And if, for instance, we said, well, the rock doesn't move, and he threw it across the room. He's like, well, it moved, and he threw it a little too hard, hit the wall, and it split into two. And I'm like, it reproduced. It's life. But we don't think that way. So I think a lot of it, I would say, hey, don't worry too much about all the little specifics, but think through how you could answer that question. And we do that even on our staff. We call it the action method. If you really want to go deeper, follow Wes. Her name is WES Cow, KAO. She's on Twitter. Twitter's amazing, by the way. It's just all who you follow. Anybody says Twitter's terrible, you're following the wrong people. There's a lot of great content in terms of like technical and communication. So just don't leave all the politics out of it, unless you like that. Wes Cow, she talks about this action method about how when you go to your, I'm sorry, it's X. How when you go to your professor, instead of asking them a specific question like, how do you want me to do this project? You would say something more like, I was thinking about the requirements for the project, and the way I look at it, I think we should do it this way because I think the benefits would be X, Y, and Z. The challenges would be C, D, E, but I still think we should do A. Do you see anything wrong with that? So that's kind of her action method, and that's kind of what we try to follow. But I think critical thinking skills are going to be so critical in everything, not just AI, because I think AI is going to have a challenge when it comes to critical thinking, at least in the first generations. And we hit artificial general intelligence, and it's all over. I'm not sure what the world looks like. It's probably like Wall-E or something.
Any other questions?
Which ones? Project management or technical? Technical, sorry. Well, I mean, we use .NET. So from the base, it's .NET. Going up from that, we've kind of built our own little structure. I would say I love the quote from, I think it's Abraham Lincoln, that said, if he was given an hour to chop down a tree, he would spend 50 minutes sharpening the axe. And I think it's the same thing with technology. We spend so much time building out tool sets for our development. So for instance, we are changing our whole development over front-end development from web forms to Vue.js. So it'd be very easy to just start with creating the new blocks for the system. But instead, we spent an insane amount of time building out the framework for creating those blocks, creating out tool sets to help us auto-gen parts that we can. And so a lot of the teams like, hey, we're not getting much done. I'm like, well, trust me, we will be so productive by the time we're done that it'll go so much smoother and everything will be less, have less bugs. So we have like an internal, I think, kind of framework of how we do that. Everything in Rock is very extensible. It's kind of like a Lego kit. You can build even screens with blocks on a page, and it's kind of crazy.
Well, thank you. That is our time. I appreciate you guys for coming. There should be cookies out in the hallway for everybody if anyone would like a snack. But thank you guys for coming. Unless anybody has anything else, I think that that's it.